to the Cut Through podcast. I'm Simon Bohr, and this is how to communicate with clarity in a noisy world. Welcome to the Cut Through podcast. I'm Simon Bohr. An important skill for any communications leader is presenting ideas with confidence. Yet, most of us feel nervous when doing so. Maybe we even have a voice in our head telling us the audience is going to see through us. In this episode of Cut Through, I want to share one of my favorite stories from the Second World War. It's about a Spanish chicken farmer who fooled the Nazi high command. And I want to explore what it can teach us about presenting with confidence. You probably haven't heard the name Juan Pujol Garcia. He's better known today as Agent Garbo, but he went by many different names during his lifetime. When he was awarded the Iron Cross by Germany after D-Day, Adolf Hitler thought he was decorating a Nazi agent codenamed Alaric. Pujol started life as a Spanish chicken farmer, and then early in the Second World War, he decided he should help Britain, and he offered his services as a spy. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the British embassy in Madrid showed no interest, but Pujol was undeterred. He decided to become a spy anyway. He created his own fictitious identity as a pro-Nazi Spanish government official who could travel to London on official business, and he contacted German military intelligence. After some hesitation, they gave him a crash course in espionage and secret writing and told him to travel to London, build up a network of agents, and report back. Instead of travelling to England, Pujol actually travelled to Lisbon, and there, armed only with a travel guide to England, a few magazines and some reference books from a local library, he began concocting entirely fictitious reports based on his supposed observations in London. Soon afterwards, the British, who were already intercepting German messages, became aware that someone was misinforming the Germans. They realized the value of this deception after the German Navy wasted resources trying to hunt down a non-existent convoy that Pujol had created. As a result, he was finally brought to Britain, and he began working formally with MI5 under the codename Agent Garbo. What I love most about the story is that he wasn't just reporting back as a single individual pretending to be a spy. He created an entirely fictitious network of sub-agents and their handlers. By the end of the war, he had created 27 separate identities, and he'd passed hundreds of letters and radio messages that were a mixture of complete fiction or genuine information, but of little value. His deceptions in advance of and immediately after D-Day were his most important work. Pujol's accounts were believed so completely by the German high command that they kept more than 20 divisions in the Pas-de-Calais for 2 months after the D-Day invasion, rather than transfer them to Normandy, because they believed that there must be a second invasion force coming. Unbelievably, his reputation in Germany emerged unscathed after D-Day, and his contribution to the defense of Nazi Europe was officially recognized. According to MI5's official history, on the 29th of July, 1944, Pujol was informed that he had been awarded the Iron Cross by the Führer himself for his extraordinary services to Germany. By return message, Pujol expressed his humble thanks for such an honour, for which he declared himself truly unworthy. So what can communicators learn from Agent Garbo? Well, Juan Pujol Garcia was clearly a great actor, hence his Greta Garbo-inspired codename. But his reports were actually not that credible if subjected to forensic examination. Because he had never visited Britain, his early reports contained obvious mistakes, such as his poor knowledge of drinking habits in Glasgow, where he claimed that his contact would, quote, do anything for a litre of wine. And remember that this was a time when intelligence was carefully scrutinised. The existence of double agents was well known, both sides ran them. So intelligence chiefs would have been actively looking for acts of deception in the run-up to D-Day. So I think Garbo's success tells us something important about how people interpret information and about how we think about ourselves when we are presenting information to others. Why did the Nazi High Command believe him? Well, in part, it's because they wanted to. There were reports from Garbo that were accurate, but deliberately delayed. For example, intelligence on troop ships leaving ports with Mediterranean camouflage arrived after the Allied North African landings, but they had an earlier postmark. German intelligence likely overweighted this accurate but ultimately useless intelligence. Confirmation bias probably also played a part in the success of his D-Day deception. Hitler had always believed that the Allied landings would come in the Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. It was much easier for him to believe intelligence that supported this conclusion than to experience the cognitive dissonance of admitting a mistake. So at one level, Agent Garbo's lesson for communicators is that the best communication starts from what your audience already believes and cares about. If you can build on your audience's preconceptions and existing beliefs, going with the grain of their thought rather than against it, then you are more likely to be successful. Would Garbo's deception have worked as well if the actual invasion had been in Calais and he had tried to convince German intelligence that it was going to be in Normandy? But for me, the bigger lesson is one about confidence. The thing that impresses me most about Pujol's story is the sheer audacity of his enterprise. His network of characters is a barely believable work of fiction. A Venezuelan student in Glasgow, an indiscreet US Army sergeant, a group of Welsh fascists calling themselves the Brothers of the Aryan World Order, and many of these were fabricated at a point that he had never even been to Britain. How was Pujol able to get away with this when we so often experience self-doubt where we are genuine experts and have real facts to support our case? And what does that mean for us when we stand in front of a board or an exco? The illusion of transparency is a cognitive bias where we tend to overestimate how much other people sense our internal thoughts and emotions. In other words, we believe that our internal experiences, what's going on in our head, is much more obvious to others than it really is. We get on a stage and we think everyone can see just how nervous we are. We make a presentation in an important meeting, and feel as though others will know the limits of our expertise. At its worst, this heightened self-consciousness can descend into anxiety and self-doubt. It can also mean we assume others know we feel or think really positively of them when we haven't been explicit about it. So for me, Agent Garbo's story of deception is a reminder of reality. It is very difficult to tell what is going on in another person's head. As any faithful will tell you, it isn't easy spotting a traitor. Even when people are on the lookout for lies, and the story they're being told is barely credible, they often still believe. The transparency illusion and confirmation bias are opposite sides of the same coin. With confirmation bias, your audience is anchoring their experiences in their pre-existing beliefs. By contrast, with the transparency illusion, you are anchoring your experience on your internal state, and you find it hard to accurately put yourself into the shoes of others. They are both fundamentally variations of our tendency to see the world from our own perspective. You feel more transparent than you really are. Your audience is more entrenched than you think. I have got some good news to finish this week's episode. Knowing about the illusion of transparency makes it less likely that you will now suffer from it. In a 2003 study, participants were asked to deliver a speech and then rate how nervous they thought they appeared to the audience. The results showed that most speakers thought they appeared more anxious than they were perceived to be by the audience. The researchers then ran the experiment for a second time. But this time, they taught some of the participants about the illusion of transparency first. The fact that people find it hard to spot your internal anxiety. The speakers who knew about the bias reported that they felt less anxious and they rated their speeches more positively. Knowing that others find it difficult to perceive our internal state can reduce our anxiousness when presenting to others. So, next time you need to present your ideas with verve and confidence, remember Agent Garbo. Before you speak, remind yourself, I look less nervous than I feel. If a Spanish chicken farmer could convince the Nazi high command that he was 27 different secret agents, then you can convince your board that you're a communications expert. After all, unlike Agent Garbo, you are what you say you are, and there's no reason to believe that any doubts that you harbor will be visible to your audience. Thank you very much for listening. For those who are interested in more on Agent Garbo, I have included links to his autobiography and some other excellent books at the bottom of my Substack article this week. Finally, please subscribe if you haven't done so already, and please share with other communicators who want to lead with confidence and cut through the noise.